everybody. We're here with Jessica K. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I love having women on the show. I think it's so important. I feel like there's a lot more people out there like speaking, like motivational speakers and stuff, and a lot of men.
Yeah, for sure.
And like we need to have more women out there, like talking, like in front of big crowds and motivating people and talking recovery. It's so important. So thank you for Recovering Out Loud with me today.
Sure. Thank you for having me.
So you and a few other people have started a podcast. Is that right?
Yeah.
And what's it called?
Repaired Podcast.
Repaired Podcast.
Right. But when you see like the logo, it's RPRD for Recovery Principles and Recovery Disciplines.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so it's you and how many people?
2 other people.
Okay, so 3 of you.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. And it's all recovery-based stories or?
Yeah, pretty
Okay.
much. Like we're going to have people coming on and like based on their story, it's going to be like what the episode goes around.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how did you guys like come up with this idea and then actually like put it into action?
This is my favorite part. So I was doing panels with this friend that I had met at an AA meeting, and I was the only woman that would do it. So like
See, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Okay.
So twice a month for like the last 6 months I'd do it. And then he would pick me up because I'm not driving yet. But he'd pick me up and we were talking and he said, he was like, I've noticed you talk a lot. And I was like, excuse me? He was like, you're really good at like carry on conversations. He was like, would you like to be a part of the podcast? And I was like, absolutely.
Yeah.
No idea what that looked like.
Oh, how funny.
Yeah.
You're just like, I'll do it.
Yeah, for sure.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
So you guys are starting to film episodes when?
On February 10th.
Okay.
We're going to record all of February, and then on March 12th, we'll release our first episode.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll get into like all the info in the end, so then people know where to contact you and all that, because that's going to be really good. I'm definitely going to go on the podcast. We're already scheduled, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Super excited.
All right. So you're obviously in recovery.
Yes.
Okay. How much time do you have?
I celebrated 2 years on November 12th.
Nice. Congratulations.
Thank you. That's crazy.
Yeah. I know, right? Like when you look, I'm like, holy shit. Like I think 7.5 years. I'm like, seriously?
Yeah.
Like never, it took me 20 years to like get sober. You know what I mean? Like I was just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So to think like I have this much time, it blows my mind.
For sure.
Just shows that it's possible, for anybody. Was this your first time trying to get sober?
No.
Okay.
No.
So let's take it back. As a little kid, where were you raised?
Oklahoma.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I was there all of my life. I grew up in, my mom and dad, like, they're still in their addiction. They were using, and like everything was good until I was like 10 years old. Like we would have like big family gatherings, and the family was just real tight knit. And then my grandpa passed away, and my mom was the baby, so she was like super close with him. And when he passed away, my parents started taking these muscle relaxers.
Okay.
And from 10 to 14, I would come in from school with my sister, and like I would literally have to like make sure they were still breathing and dig food out of their mouth. And like this went on for a long time until the state came in and took me and my sister.
Wow.
Yeah.
And was your sister younger or?
Yeah, she was younger, 4 years younger.
So the first 10 years, there was none of this.
Mm-mm.
Wow. Were they somas or like what?
Yeah, somas. Yeah.
Okay. And did they get into anything else? I mean.
Oh yeah, eventually it was everything.
Yeah. Wow. So when did the state finally come in and take you out?
So it started when I was 10, and at 14 they came and removed me and my sister. And my parents, they stopped doing everything and did everything that was required of them, and they got us back within like 9 months. But as soon as the case was closed, it started back up. Yeah.
And did you want to be with your parents at that time, or I mean, what were you feeling? Were you mad? Were you...
for sure.
Yeah.
I basically gave up because like I was doing really good in school, and then as soon as I went there, like that's when I started using, like started drinking and smoking, and I didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I thought that like my parents didn't love me enough to stop,
Which is what you would think for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, even with my son, he's 15 now, but he experienced, some of my using and drinking, and it was like, well, just stop, and he was just little, but just like as much as he could process, it was like, well, why do you have to do that? Because when we're little, like we don't really get it. We got Hazel in the house. I wish I could just like bring her up on my lap. Probably not though, huh?
She would.
Daria's here. She's Hazel. Come here. Come on. She's like, nah, I don't think so. Okay, so you started partying at what, like 15, 16?
14.
At 14. So like pretty much right when all this started happening, you're like, screw this, just started partying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. They got us back, and when they started using again, and I was like, they don't care, I don't care.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And so you were like smoking.
I was smoking
drinking.
weed, and it like quickly progressed to cocaine and alcohol. And like there was these clubs in Oklahoma City that would let minors in, and like I was like 14, 15 going into these clubs, meeting guys and getting cocaine, and then I'd go home and I'd sleep with them for money. And so that went on from 14 to 18.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's how you're getting money. And what was going on with your parents at this time?
They were so loaded that like, well, the thing, I had my friend, her mom was actually addicted to crack. And so she would lie to my parents for me. So she knew what we were doing. So I'd go stay every weekend over there and then just go out and then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you obviously knew there was a problem, right? But you're just like, fuck it, I'm just going to do it anyways kind of thing, or?
I didn't really know it was a problem. I mean, yeah, I get, no. I was like, they do it, why I can too. Like, it's normal for me.
Yeah. So that was just like what you knew, your reality. We got Hazel's being like drama over here in the background. We've got a drama dog. Okay, so like, how long did you stay in Oklahoma for? Like, doing all this? Like, did you only move to California recently, or?
In April of 2021.
Okay, and how old are you?
34.
Okay, wow. So you were in Oklahoma doing this for that long. So what did that lead into?
Well, I mean, from 14 to 18, I was, my mom, she was super abusive. And like, as soon as I turned 18, the first opportunity I got, I moved out and I met my oldest daughter's dad.
Okay.
And he was a drug dealer. He never did drugs, but like he was super abusive, And so like when I was with him, I was like, young and naive. And I was like, oh my gosh, if I touch his drugs, he's going to hurt me. And so I stayed sober from 18 to 27. But I was with him for 5 years. It was a lot of abuse, and I eventually left him. And I'm super codependent too. So 2 months after that, I met my second baby daddy. And I was with him for about 5 years, and the abuse got super bad. And eventually the state came in and took my kids.
Oh, wow. Because of the abuse. So what was going on?
So I had to take this domestic violence class, and like there's these different phases. And in the beginning, it's just like I lived 2 houses down from my family, and I couldn't even go see them. Like I was like that being held captive in my own home, and like I had to do what he said because I mean he loved me the way my mom loved me. So I thought it was normal.
That's what you were used to.
For sure.
Looking back now, like what were those warning signs that you were overlooking in the beginning with both relationships that were, that led to abuse? Like,
well, I mean, like immediately they would always put me down and like say negative things. And it went from like name calling to like being told what I could and couldn't do. And then eventually it got physical. Yeah.
And you didn't really see it, right? And then it just got like carried away, and that's how it was. And then, so you had 2 kids at this point?
3.
And their ages were?
7, 2, and 1.5.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so when did drugs come back into the picture?
When, so they took my kids and I was still with their dad, and I was doing all the classes. I did everything they asked me to do. But at some point I found out that if I stayed with him, there was no way I was getting the kids back because he was the abuser. And so eventually I moved out of there. And for the first time in my life, I got a job. I got my own place. I had everything. My kids were staying the night. They were spending the weekend. And it was like a week before they came home, and the foster family was like nitpicking at things like kids being kids. And the caseworker came and she was like, I don't think you're ready. We're going to postpone the reunification. And they were supposed to be home in a week. And in that moment, I felt completely defeated because my mom told me I was never enough. Every man I had ever been with told me I wasn't enough. And so I started to believe it, and that's when I started drinking. And then it led to meth, heroin, and all the other things.
So you started drinking. And then how did that progression happen? Like looking back, like what did that look like?
After I had that meeting with the case manager, I lived 2 houses down from a bar. And I was like, oh, how convenient, And I was in there every night. I would literally stay out and drink until 2 a.m. They'd close up. I'd drink a little bit longer, and then I'd be at work at 6 a.m. And then it just became too much, so I quit my job. And then that's when I got introduced to meth. And that my skill, like the things I learned when I was 14 about using men, that became my lifestyle.
And so were you still with the last guy in the relationship? So you're just on your own at this point. Yeah. And obviously you were completely numbing yourself out, right?
Oh, for sure.
I mean, were you seeing your kids any communication at all at that point?
No, I had no communication. And like, I felt like I had failed at the one thing I was born to do, to be a mom. Like I was great at being a mom, and like, my kids were perfectly taken care of. He never put hands on my children. It was just me, but because they were there, that was an issue.
Yeah.
And so they took that from me.
And And so were you out on the streets or?
I was couch surfing, hotel hopping. Towards the end of me being out in Oklahoma, I was on the streets. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And did you have any support around you whatsoever?
No, me and my parents, we would get loaded together.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And they're still out there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did anyone around you get sober while you were nobody?
No, I remember the day I decided that I wanted to do something different. I was out on, sitting on a curb outside of a hotel room because I had nowhere to go. The man that I was with at the time, like, kicked me out of the car. He kept everything I had. And, someone had given me a number to a man that was out here, and I reached out to him, and he was like, all right, we'll get you going. And he got me out here 3 days later. Mm-hmm. But like, I was like, how much, worse can it get? You know?
Yeah. And then your younger sister,
she's in prison.
She's in prison.
Mm-hmm. She's in prison on her 4th and 5th drug trafficking charge.
In Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm. Zero tolerance. Yeah.
Okay. So you got that number.
Yeah. And
I called.
Yep.
So what was the final thing that made you do that?
I lost everything. Mm-hmm. I had nowhere to go. Like, I had no safe space to go. Like, I would lie, manipulate, and cheat my way through everything. So like, nobody trusted me. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, it's time to do something different, you know? Mm-hmm. For sure.
And so you made that call. Mm-hmm. And you've never left Oklahoma?
Never. I mean, I stayed in Florida for a couple months, but that was with my oldest daughter's dad, and that had to end quickly. But like, I would stay gone for a couple months, and I'd be so homesick. Uh-huh. And so, yeah.
So you came out here by yourself.
Terrified.
And at this point, still no contact with your kids?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what happened? You got on that plane and came out here, and walk us through what happened after that.
So I came out here, and that's when I realized like my drug problem was my codependency problem was just as bad as my drug problem. Mm-hmm. So I came out here, I made it to 30 days. And within that 30 days, I was like, oh my God, like, I'll never use again. You know, mm-hmm. I was absolutely certain. And then this guy like messaged me on Facebook and was like, let's hang out. And then he started telling me about this treatment center that was like THC friendly. And I was like, oh, tell me more, you know? And he comes to pick me up. He takes me from, where was I? Fountain Valley to Venice. And he was like, we stopped at the store. He was like, would you like a drink of water? And I was like, or something to drink? I was like, yeah, some water. And so he goes in and gets water and comes back out, and he has this 40-ounce fountain drink or whatever, a big gulp. Mm-hmm. And he has a beer and he pours it in there. And I was like, oh, crap. You know, like, mm-hmm. And then we ended up going to the beach, and we were talking, and he kept drinking, and he was hitting like a weed pen. And at that point I was like, fuck it, you know?
Yeah.
And the next thing you know, we bought some acid off the bums, and like, we just went all out. Mm-hmm. And the next day I had to beg for a spot. Like, I was like, this is not what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Like what I hear is like the impulse control. You couldn't even manage it.
No.
Self will run riot, right? Like, you were just like all or nothing sort of thing.
For sure.
Yeah. And so, but the next day you're like, no, this is not what I want.
No. Right. And I like the next morning I called the treatment center I was at, the guy, and I was like, hey, can I come back? And he was like, no, I don't think you're ready. He was like, you need to go out there and, you know, get a little more pain. And I was like, what?
It's crazy because like that whole thing, like I used to say that to clients back in the day, like 7.5 years ago when I started working in treatment, which I shouldn't have started working in treatment that early because I was newly sober, but nonetheless I did. But yeah, we used to say that like, hey, maybe you need to go out and get some more experience, you know? And it's like, you can't say that anymore.
Yeah.
Because people are dying.
Right.
Like, there is no like, go out there, you know, check it out and you come back. It's like, no, man, like, you're going to fucking die.
Yeah.
You know? So like, and you say that and I'm like, ugh, because it's just not like that anymore. Right. So he said, go get some more experience, get out there. Right. And what'd you say?
I wouldn't stop. I was like, no, I need a bed today. I was like, you know, I if you want me to stand in place and jump 10 hours every day to stay sober to get this, I was like, I'll do it. I'll do whatever. He got me a bed.
Okay.
Yeah. So I did another 30 days in detox, and I relapsed again.
Okay. Yeah. What was the detox experience like for you with being like a long-term drug user? Like, I know a lot of people get really scared to go to detox, you know, maybe someone that's listening because they've been using for so long. They're like, oh my God, I don't know what this is going to be like. I don't know what I'm going to experience. Like, what was it like for you?
Like, my first time going in, it was obviously terrifying because I didn't know anybody. Everything I knew was back home. Mm-hmm. But when I got there, like, I mean, yeah, it's scary, but I had a place to sleep. I didn't have to worry about where I was going, like every day worrying about where I was going to stay. You know, I was fed, I hadn't eaten, I don't know how long, you know, and like, I'm a people pleaser too. So like, I was willing to do whatever it took. So I was like the most engaged client they had. Like I would always get compliments on how like I participated in all the groups, and like I would give feedback and whatever they requested I was doing.
When you were doing that, do you feel like you were people pleasing but holding back on the real stuff underneath it all?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. And because you relapsed again.
Right.
So what took you out that time?
Well, when I like they would put me in with the therapist, and I would tell the therapist exactly what I thought he wanted to hear. Yeah, because I didn't need him. I didn't know him. He didn't need to know all the dark and ugly stuff that was going on.
So you had your reservations. You were
for
like
sure.
1 foot in, wanted to be sober, but 1 foot out, you didn't want to do the work.
Right. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So when you went out, did you go out with somebody? Was it another guy?
A girl this time.
A girl that time?
Yeah, yeah.
And so what happened then?
Just because, like, I mean, in the sober living, they wanted you to go to meetings, they wanted you to do all these things, but I just wanted to be sober. Like you said, I didn't want to do the work, and eventually we got tired. Like there was curfews and all these things, so we made this impulse decision to just leave. And we went to a treatment center that was THC friendly, or like a IOP, and it was a total flop house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah. Total flop house. Yeah.
And so you stayed there for how long?
A day.
Okay.
Because like they're like, oh, we're getting the house ready, and they put me on this couch. It's like pieced off, and like I'm laying on it, and like I'm falling through the crack, and there's these 2 dogs like crying, and a cat that keeps attacking me.
Oh Jesus!
And so I called because I had a sponsor, but that's I just had her number, and so I called her at the time, and I was like, I need help, and so she reached out to somebody, and they got me into a sober living in Garden Grove, and that's where I started using fentanyl.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd never used fentanyl before?
No. And it changed everything. Nothing else mattered.
And so you got set. Wait, but you went to a sober living house in Garden Grove?
The like PHP, IOP portion.
And that's where you got fentanyl? Okay. So how did that all go down?
Well, I was doing I was doing good. And then we had like 2 hours on Zoom IOP during the day, and that was it. And like meetings weren't enforced. And like the longer I was there, the more I started to notice that when I would go and like talk to the house manager and go into her room, she had rolled up dollars laying on her like dresser and stuff.
Yeah.
And then at one point she gave me the company card and was like, go to the store.
This is crazy.
Yeah, yeah. She was like, go to the store in the druggy buggy, and pick me up some alcohol. She was like, you can get scratchers if you want. And I was like, okay,
Wow.
Yeah.
It's like disgusting that there's stuff like this out there. It makes me so sick. I want to just like go do bad things to these people.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
Yeah.
So when did you finally get sober, and stayed sober? What was the final thing for you that you didn't relapse after 30 days and leave treatment?
So when I flew out here originally, whoever flew me out here, they got my insurance too. And I guess they got it for 6 months. Well, that 6 month came and it went. And I relapsed again, and I decided to leave this treatment center, and I went on a run for a couple of days with some guy. And I knew it's not what I wanted to do. Like I didn't want to, I felt disgusting when I did it,
Yeah.
So I started calling people I knew that were like could help me get in, and they're like, oh, your insurance doesn't work. And I was like, oh my God. Like I ran out of options. And I felt so desperate in that moment that I was like, what do I do? And I had reached out to a woman on Facebook that someone suggested she'd be my sponsor a long time ago. And I was like, you don't know me. I was like, but I've heard of you. I was like, I need help, And she sent me numbers to all these detox. So for every day for a week, I would call these detox. And they're like, no, we don't have a bed. We don't have a bed. And like on that last day, I was like, what's the point? I was about to give up hope. And then she called me or texted me, and she was like, here's this mental health crisis center. She was like, call them. And so she was like, just be honest. And so I called them, and they're like, come now, we have a bed.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you went. It just goes to show you though, the purpose of planting seeds and what it can do, because it's like, even though you would leave treatment and you didn't want to do the program and all that, but those seeds were still planted because you knew to reach out to this person that could possibly help. And then it sounds like you really got willing and you surrendered finally.
Finally. Yeah.
And so you went to this place, and was it were you detoxing there, or what was it that you?
It was just straight mental health.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I stayed there for 30 days, and they had set up a housing appointment for me to get placed somewhere. And my time was up there, and I didn't know what to do. So I had made friends. I don't know if you've heard of Jackson with Stay Stopped. Recovery
I know.
Girl.
Yeah, Jackson.
I love that man so much. I texted him because we had built a relationship, and I was like, my time's up here. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have 9 days until this. And without hesitation, he sent me his address and was like, come sleep on my couch.
Wow.
Yeah. So I slept on his couch for 9 days.
Nice, Jackson.
Yeah.
That's so dope. Jesus.
Yeah.
Wow.
He actually gave me my first hope chip too. And like, I didn't understand that at that moment.
Yeah.
Because I also lied to him about how much time I had.
Uh-huh. So you were still lying. Yeah, doing what you could. But
Yeah.
here you are, you're with somebody, they care about you, they're letting you sleep on their couch.
Yeah.
When did you actually like start doing the deal?
So after that 9 days was up, within that 9 days, I had the housing appointment. They put me in this program. I don't know if you've heard of Vera Sanctuary. It's a county nonprofit. It's for women who have been sex trafficked, domestic violence victims. They help detox pregnant women and reunite women with their children.
Love it.
And so that's where I got placed. And I remember I was telling Jackson, I was like, this sounds so horrible. You know, like I have to be in this house for 30 days with how many other women, like all women. I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. And he was like, no, he was like, you're going to love it. It's going to be so great for you. And I was like, no way. All these women, you know, because I had this idea that like all those women were just like me when I was getting loaded, you know, I was horrible. And so I get there and I knew that I didn't want to feel like I did in that moment when I thought I had no options. That desperation.
Yeah.
It was the worst feeling. So I got a sponsor. I started working the steps. She kept telling me to pray. And I was like, why? You know?
Yeah.
But she was like, just stick Post-its up everywhere and, you know, it'll remind you. So I did just because she told me to do it. And
what was like your day to day like in those first few days there where you did these things and you stayed? What was it like? Like walk us through one of the very first days.
It was scary for sure. It's in like this canyon and there's like 3 houses. One is the house with the women and the babies, and they have 2 more houses. And I was.
Is it Trabuco Canyon?
Yes.
Okay, I know the place now.
Yes,
I've been there. Yeah.
Yeah, that place. Yeah, I changed my life. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. So I wasn't really detoxing, you know, because I came from the mental health in Jackson. So immediately I got up and I was in the groups. We had groups like, you know, at any place from 9 to 4. And in the evenings they would have Zoom meetings because I was there for 120 days. When they told me that, I was like, oh gosh, I thought it was 30, you know? And COVID was a thing. So we were locked down for 120 days, no offsite visits, no nothing. And I was like, whatever it takes. I knew there was one point, like I would get frustrated because there was this woman and she was like always acting out. And they told her, if you do what is required of you, we'll reward you by taking you out to do something fun. I took so much offense to that. And I asked my case manager, I was like, how are you going to reward the people who don't do what they're supposed to be doing? I was like, what about people like me who do everything that you ask every day?
Yeah.
And she was like, well, do you want to know a secret? And I was like, yeah. She was like, they'll be back, you won't.
Yeah.
And I took that to heart. You know, like, oh, okay, as long as I mind my own business and focus on me, like I don't
Stay
ever
in
have
your own lane.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, it's so hard to do at the beginning, but staying in your own lane, just keeping your side of the street clean, like life is so much more peaceful there.
Oh, for sure.
Because I used to be like that too. When I went to treatment, I was always like, this girl's not doing this or blah, blah, blah. And they would always tell me to go sit on my hands. Jenny, go sit on your hands. Go sit on I'm like, motherfucker. Like I didn't want to go sit on my hands, but it taught me so much in those moments. Like I had horrible impulse control too, you know, and I wanted all the answers and I wanted what I wanted when I wanted it and fast and now and having to just like sit there in my own shit, you know, and like actually start to remove myself from it. It was such a like healing process. So I can only imagine being there for those 120 days locked down.
Yeah.
As excruciating as it was, I'm sure it was just so healing for you.
Absolutely.
What do you think you learned the most about yourself during those 120 days?
So I finally got open and honest with my therapist. I was like, you know what? I was like, I know that what I've been doing up to this point is not been working. So I told him, I was like, here's everything. And so we decided to do EMDR. And like through every like memory we would work through, the negative like belief over it was I'm not enough. I didn't feel like I would be enough to do anything, you know?
Yeah.
And so we did that. And then like, it turned out to be like those women were so supportive and like, they were always like telling me like positive things about me. Like they were telling me I was, you know, amazing. I was beautiful. I was like, they were super grateful to have me around. And I was like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Like I've never heard that, you know?
Yeah. I love that. You started getting your self-worth back.
Yeah, for sure.
Working the steps. What was the most impactful part of that for you? I
think, okay, so when I worked the step 3, I remember I was struggling with like the idea of a higher power because I couldn't see it or touch it, you know?
Yeah.
And so I remember I had like got overwhelmed and I was crying and like immediately like I go into prayer, something I've never done before. And I started praying, you know, and then like as soon as I got done praying, I felt like this overwhelming sense of peace. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't feel him or see him, or like I didn't see him or touch him, but I felt him. Like I felt that. There was like no denying it, you know? And like I think that's really when things started to change for sure, because that's the only thing I did different this time from all the other times. Like I would do bits and pieces, but this time, you know, I found my higher power.
Yeah. I struggled with that too. It eventually turned into the ocean for me, my higher power. But at the beginning with my sponsor, she was like, well, you trust me, right? Like you're taking my suggestions. I'm like, yes. Taking direction. Yes. She's like, okay, well, how about you just believe that I believe? Like just simple as that. So yeah, like there's so many different ways that we can look at it, because people really do struggle with that. Like you hear it a lot, especially with like the youngsters, you know, they're like, I don't believe in that.
Yeah, for sure.
It's like, well, it can be what you make it to be, you know, whatever works to get you over that hurdle, you know, to get you down on your knees one way or another, and just have that like willingness, you know, to try something different. Cause obviously it wasn't working the way we were doing it before. That's
Absolutely.
for damn sure. Yeah. So after 120 days, where did you go?
I actually went into the sober living that was attached to Vera's, and they actually helped me get into school so I can get my CADAC.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I did that. I got out. I had 5 months, so I was there, and at 7 months, I got my first job.
Amazing.
Yeah,
And was that
treatment.
working in treatment?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So you started giving back?
Yeah.
How did that feel?
That was amazing, especially like when we would destroy the like paraphernalia and stuff. And I was just sitting there thinking, I was like, that's crazy. This stuff used to own my life, and now here I am destroying it. Like that was kind of empowering for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
I remember that too. I worked in Detox for a little while, and yeah, I was like, wow, I can't believe I'm actually doing this. It's so cool. And just like giving back, like, did you feel like you had found your purpose? Because for me, it's like once I started helping other people, I'm like, wow, this is what I'm meant to do. Like, was it the same for you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. At first, like I was like, I would take it like personal when I was like putting, like giving as much as I could to the clients, and then they'd like dip out anyway. But eventually I got to a point that I like understood that like, if they don't get it, at least I'm planting a seed, because so many seeds were planted with me, and they're with me today, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. I remember one of my professors was always like, don't work harder than the client. It's like, oof, that's hard though.
It's so hard.
Especially when you're a people pleaser too. So how did you deal with like the people pleasing and the codependency and all of that? How did you work through those things?
So when I came to California, my boyfriend was supposed to be right behind me, and he never made it. And I'm super grateful for that, because if he did make it, there's no telling where I'd be right now. And I've always heard people suggest not to date in the first year. And I knew that if I did, I knew where I could end up. So I made that decision myself to not date in the first year.
Nice.
And then I tried dating when I had like 13 or 14 months, and it didn't work out. That guy didn't believe in a higher power, and like it didn't work with me, you know, among other things. He was sober for 6 years and didn't work a program. And, you know, I just didn't agree with it.
So in that first year, like for people that are listening that are feeling lonely and they want that somebody and they want to go on a date, but they're trying to like not date, what would you say to those people out there?
I would say it's super important to like, because I didn't know who I was. Like I had to figure that out, you know, and I didn't know what I liked, and I didn't know what was healthy versus unhealthy, because like my entire life, my normal was abuse and like name calling and red flags. So I had to learn, you know, what was okay and what wasn't.
Yeah.
And then like I got into my second year, and I started like working more on my relationship with my higher power. And I just I don't really want to date.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it was a lot of like learning to love myself, which took like 5 years, honestly, like work in progress with that. But really enjoying my own company.
Right.
You know, like I was one of those people that always had to be around people. Like I couldn't do anything by myself. And just like now I'm like dangerously like love just being by myself and like having my own company. So like getting to that space, like do you enjoy just your own company now?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. It's like
I
the
love
best feeling. So you tried dating, didn't work. You just kept working on yourself.
Right.
And so are you dating now, or?
I mean, I'm talking to somebody.
Yeah. But like nothing serious.
No.
So what happened with your kiddos?
So, obviously I was out using for 7 years, and finally I came and did this. And, I remember I had like 3 months, I was still in program, and I reached out to the woman that had my 2 younger children and my daughter's dad, and they responded. And so I called the my first sponsor that I had, and I was like, oh my gosh, I reached out to my kids and they responded, and she was like, don't ever do that again. She was like, next time you want to make a decision like that, call me. I was like, oh, okay. She was like, because I don't want you to think that just because you have a couple months under your belt, it's going to go and like all the damage you've caused is going to go away.
True.
I was like, dang, that was harsh. So I never called her again.
Yeah. So you haven't talked to them again yet?
Well, no, not the sponsor. I like, how dare her
the
tell
sponsor.
me that.
I was like, the kids.
No.
Wait, what?
But and I got out and I started working, and my oldest daughter's dad, he, talked to me because he's like, your daughter needs to know who you are and where she comes from. So like I have a relationship with her. We talk all the time on FaceTime. I haven't seen her in person yet, but I get to see her in July. I get to fly her out here for a week.
That's amazing. And how old is she?
14.
And does she like understand what's going on?
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm telling you, like my son, he knows all about my past, and we have the best relationship now. And like there was 2.5 years where I hardly saw him because his dad it's a long story, but whatever. I did the work, I was super consistent. I allowed him time to heal, and therapy and all that stuff. And I thought, okay, we'll get back a little bit, this, that. And now he's just with me full time. And it's honestly the best feeling. And just having everything out there in the open, like my story helps him, like know what to do in certain situations. So I think like being so open and honest with our kids is so important.
For sure.
Like there's a lot of people that are like, oh, don't tell them too much because then they might go do it. It's like, no, they're going to do it anyways. Like, unfortunately, like kids will be kids, teenagers are going to be teenagers, but to know what we've gone through and be able to educate them, it's like the whole fentanyl thing. Like I'm like preaching, we need to start in like middle school and start like educating kids about the dangers of fentanyl.
Yeah.
Like I'm having lunch tomorrow with a woman who lost her son. He was a teenager, because there was fentanyl in the weed. I mean, it's everywhere, and we need to educate. So I'm so glad she's coming out to see you.
I'm so excited.
Yeah.
So with my other two children, I had to kind of like, my daughter's dad made it easy for me. He was like, I just want you to be, a mother to your daughter. And so the woman who adopted my other two children, like I had to work for that. And so 2 weeks ago, I seen my children for the first time in 7 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
On FaceTime?
No, I went and seen them in Oklahoma.
Oh, you went there and saw them. What was that like?
Oh my gosh, it was overwhelming for sure. You know?
What was your support like during that you set up to protect yourself? Because I would imagine that was a very emotional time.
To go like seeing my children?
Yeah, just in case you got triggered or, were really emotional. I mean, what was your plan?
So I have a couple people out there that are like really strong in their sobriety. So I could have called them. And my baby cousin, like, our relationship got really rocky because I started using when she lived with me and she was pregnant. And so like we just distanced ourselves. And so like I'm able to like slowly like build that relationship with her. So like I always stay with her. Like they don't want me to stay anywhere else. And it's like the safest place for me to go,
Yeah.
So she went with me, and her daughter got to meet my kids for the first time. So that was so exciting.
Wow. And how old are they now?
9 and 10.
9 and 10. So 9, 10, and 14. And so are you trying to get them back like out here with you or?
So they terminated my parental rights.
Okay.
And it was crazy. They terminated them. I got that letter, and 3 days later I found out I was pregnant again. So I actually went through the adoption process with the 4th kid.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I get to show, like, I get updates on him too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with all those emotions now?
It was hard at first. Like I had a hard time forgiving myself, but I remember watching this thing, and it said, you have to learn to be grateful for the things that you wish didn't happen the most. And I was like, how can I do that? And so I started thinking like, I was a great mother to my children, but I was not the best version of me. Like I was being beat down. And so like to go through all the things that I went through and be where I am today, like my kids are going to know that the strength that I have, they have it too. And they get the best version of me,
Yeah.
And to be there for them to any extent is better than none at all.
And so with your parents, talking about that relationship, I'm sure there's a lot of emotions with that. I mean, were you able to get to a point of forgiveness or at least turning it over to your higher power?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did that process look like for you?
I remember I was in program and I just started crying because like I was so worried about like if something happened to them and like I wasn't there to help them, and I just broke down, and so I prayed like everybody told me to do, and I was like, I can't do anything about this, and in that like I felt relieved, and then in that moment I realized that like no amount of stress, worry, anxiety was going to alter the way that my life is planned out to go. So it helped a lot. I'm able to communicate with my parents a lot more than I was. My dad actually went to Detox for the first time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, would you like to have them back in your life?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. I think, it's so different when we're younger and we're like in it too. Like for me, I was so mad at especially my dad, and I didn't realize like he was just doing the best that he could with what he had. And it's like this generational thing, right? And now like being older, and he's passed, and I say I have a better relationship with him now that he's passed, because I understand addiction now, and he was addicted to other things. I think he was addicted to like sex and love. And, now I'm able to see like, okay, he had this and he never talked about it. And so I like judged him a certain way, but now I've found that forgiveness and I'm like, okay, he was just doing the best he could,
Yeah.
and you can look at your parents that way and your kids can look at you that way. And then you get to break, like, how good does that feel to break that cycle?
Yeah.
now?
It's amazing for sure.
Like this does not have to continue. Like this is where it stops.
Right.
Yeah. What have you learned about yourself the most through this whole process?
That I'm stronger, obviously, than I thought I was. Like the fact that I have been to school and I have a job, like a regular job. I work 9 to 5, like I have all these responsibilities. And then I have people who want me to be a part of things that I never imagined that I would be good enough for, like I never, like school wasn't in my cards. We never talked about that. Like we barely made it survive growing up,
Yeah.
And so the fact that I even went to school, like I was super nervous when I started. I was like, oh my God, I'm too stupid for this. And I passed with all A's.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
You're smart.
Yeah.
Getting that self-worth is just such an amazing feeling. I mean, did you do like affirmation exercises and things like that?
Affirmations. Yeah. Gratitude list, like all the things. Yeah.
Yeah. And you worked with a therapist and you're part of a support group community,
Yes.
right? And do you sponsor other girls as well at this point, or?
Not yet. I have a lot. I'm still going back and forth to Oklahoma, clearing up the wreckage. So I'm going back and forth between there, and then all these different things coming up in life. So,
what would you say to women out there that are struggling, with the whole thing like you've gone through with your children? Because a lot of times that just keeps women out there. I mean, men too that are going through the same thing. They just completely give up and they're like, "Fuck it, I'm not going to have my kids. What's the point?" I mean, what would you say to someone out there listening that's going through that and is just on the point of being like, screw it?
So I know I remember at one point I realized that I watch a lot of like documentaries and true crime stuff. And there's these children that were adopted out and they all wanted to know who their parents were. All of them. So I knew that at one point my kids were going to come looking for me. Like, even if I had to wait until they're 18, they were going to want to know. And I wanted them to come find something worth finding.
That's a really good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No one's ever said it quite like that, but yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
I used to think like back in the day, because I used to work in a totally different industry and no one knew me. Like I was like this AKA, nobody knew who I was. I was a totally different person at home. And I used to always think like, fuck, if I died, like nobody would even know who I am. Like who would even show up at my funeral? And so for me, just a little bit different. But when I got sober, I was like, you know what? I want to leave a legacy where like people know who I am, and that I can be somebody that people can be proud of. My son can be proud of that. Right. And I feel like we're so selfish in our addictions that we don't even like consider those things, until afterwards it's like, oh, so what does the future look like for you? I know we're not supposed to get too ahead of ourselves, but what are some of your goals and dreams and aspirations?
So I love what I do, like as far as my career, like I love helping other people and like being a part of that. But I feel like with that, I can only reach like a certain amount of people. I want to reach like big crowds, I want to be able to help as many people, as possible. Like I just want to continue doing something along these lines.
What do you think that is in you that gives you like that power to do that? Because a lot of people are scared to have a voice or they just don't want to do it. So what do you think that is in you?
I think it's because of where I came from and then like going through the process of getting sober and seeing those people that were there for me that helped me help me go when I didn't feel like it or believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, because like we have a lot of self-doubt and we think we're not capable of doing things and we are, How'd you go from a victim to a survivor? That was one of the hardest things for me. I mean, I was able to like realize that like all the situations I was in, I put myself there. You know, there was ultimately something I did that led me to those circumstances, you know?
Yeah. And although it's not our fault,
Right.
right?
For
We
sure.
always like being able to look at our part in things for sure. Yeah. When I was able to change that mindset, because I was like comfortable there being a victim, because then I had people to blame,
Right.
you know, and I could just be like, well, fuck that. You know, these people did this to me and I'm never going to forgive them. And, you know, this whole thing and just like being in that, like we can get so used to sitting in that doom and gloom that it gets so comfortable. And once I finally was like, no, like I can be a survivor, it just gave all my power back to me.
Right.
Like I didn't realize like how much I was letting those abusers control me. Like,
Yeah.
did you feel that lift off of you when you decided to let go of all that?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of work though, huh?
It does. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're helping other people, what does that make you feel like inside?
It makes me feel, I don't know. It makes me proud of myself, you know, to know that like, but I also know that I was there, you know, and like to be able to help somebody get out of that and show like I'm very open about my past and like all the things that I've been through in hopes that I could say something that like will give them hope too.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody out there right now that's struggling and doesn't know if they should get help or not?
That they should, you know, it's totally worth it. Like I am living a life today that I never imagined would be mine, you know, I'm doing things that I never thought were possible. I definitely believe in myself and love myself and respect myself. And like, I'm just completely different person.
Yeah. That's what I love about doing these podcasts. I'm excited for yours because it just shows how far we can come.
Right.
You know, like there's such a stigma still surrounding, you know, addiction, mental health, and people are looked at just like this drug addict or this alcoholic, and they're like, you know, no good, da 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 da. And it's like, it doesn't discriminate. You know, this is affecting everybody one way or another. It's going to come knocking at your door, you know, and it just like, we were all happy little kids at one point.
Right.
You know, and I just, anytime I see somebody homeless or walking on the street, I just did a ride along with somebody on Friday, you know, that's out in the homeless population. And every time I'm like, that was like someone's little kid at some point. And we can be in such this depth of just addiction and just everything be so horrible. And then look at the lives we create. It's like, not only do we get sober, we like have this superpower to become the best versions of ourselves.
Right.
To be able to like give it back and help others. Like, it's amazing.
For sure.
You know, like who would have thought? And so like, if we can do it, anybody can really do it. You just have to have that willingness, right? So the willingness and surrendering process for you, would you say that was like the hardest part?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Coming in, I was like, I'm an adult. I have children. Like, I don't need anybody telling me how I need to live my life. I was wrong.
Yeah. I just need to get sober and that's it. Working with a sponsor, what was that like for you?
Scary. Because, like a lot of women, I have a hard time, I have a hard time creating like relationships with women because my mom, the one who was supposed to love me the most, she caused the most trauma in my life. So I was like, if she can do that to me, like, what are these women capable of?
Yeah. And that's why I ask, because a lot of women struggle with other women. And it's just so stupid because I don't want to say it's stupid, okay? Because it is what it is at the time. But then when we get on the other side of that, it's like the most amazing bonds. But I was the same way. I was like, I'm not going to go to an all women's treatment center. And I ended up at one. Both of them that I went to were all women's. Oh, I'm not going to talk to anybody. And then I would end up talking to them. Oh, I'm not going to get it. I even tried to get, I even said I was bisexual at first to get a male sponsor. Like I did like the stupidest shit, right? Because I was like, I can't just deal with a woman. Nope. But that's exactly what I needed. And it's like that uncomfortableness of what we're like trying to pull away from, like that's what we need.
Right.
It's like when we get uncomfortable, like magic happens after that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I make it like I'm always putting myself in uncomfortable situations because I feel like now in my life, I'm on a journey of never ending growth. And like I have people that are like reaching their hands out to me and like, let me help you with this or this or this. And I'm like, absolutely, you know, whatever I can get.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I really struggle with like speaking in front of big groups of people, and like people trip out on that because I do all this stuff on social media. But like getting in front of like a big group, like 100 more, whatever people and standing up and speaking. Like Fausto had asked me like, why don't you? And I'm like, because this is what happens. I feel like I'm going to go up there. I'm going to get tunnel vision. I'm going to totally forget what I'm going to say. And then I'm going to throw up and pass out. Like that's literally verbatim, like what I tell myself is going to happen. So I've made a commitment to start speaking in like smaller settings and get really uncomfortable and then just actually start doing it. Like I'm speaking this Thursday at a place. It's just like 15 people. So whatever, we'll start there. But yeah, like we all have our struggles. And I think it's so good to talk about it because it's so relatable to other people. Like it's still to this day, it like blows my mind every time I start talking about something. Someone goes, I have the same thing, and we're just so relatable. Like we're all going through stuff and just being able to start off with just saying, hey, I'm nervous right now. I have anxiety. This is how I feel. It comforts us, but it also like comforts other people too, to know like we're all going through it.
Right. Cause there's like brief moments that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous. And like everybody's looking at me, not knowing that like they're thinking the same thing. They're not worried about you.
Exactly. Man, I used to go to meetings at first and I used to literally like ruin the whole meeting because I would be thinking about what I was going to say if I got called on. Like literally. And then I would leave the meeting like mad at myself. So I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even listen to the meeting because I was so stuck in self about like, what was I going to say? What was I going to say? Is it going to be okay? You know, and just being able to get to the point to like, let that go.
Yeah. I know I would have the same thing. Like when I would go do panels or something, I would think about it so much that I would almost like convince myself to not do it. And I had brought it up to one of my friends and he was like, that's your ego. He was like, what?
Sure.
I was like, what do you mean? He was like, why do you think you're so important that you need to plan out what you need to say to these people? Like you lived it. And so I don't think about anything I'm doing anymore until I'm like there. And then like, it's already happening.
Yeah. And just to remember, like, it's not about us.
Yeah.
It's really not.
No.
It's not about us anymore. It's what we can give to somebody else. And it's the best. I wouldn't do anything else. It's just, I love helping people. I love that you're helping people and that you're a voice and you've gone through so much. And how amazing are you, that you've been able to get through all of this? Because, in all accounts, both of us, everyone in this room probably, except besides Emily, should be dead. Like we've all been given these second chances at life. So it's like, what are we going to do with it?
Right.
And like changing that mentality of like, oh, maybe other people, maybe they'll do something. Oh, why not me mentality?
Right.
Like we can do anything we want. Absolutely. Really, like look at what we've already overcome.
Yeah.
Like it's all there. And so now you're going to be doing this with the podcast.
I'm so excited.
I love this.
Yeah.
So tell me again, the mission of the podcast.
So it's with a nonprofit. We hope to be able to help people who want to get into treatment that can't afford it. Like we want to be able to get a scholarship for them into some sort of treatment center. And if they don't need a bed, if they need like help with personal items or something like hygiene or whatever, because when I came out here, I had no clothes. I had $3 and that was it. I was digging out of donations. So we want to be able to help them to make it easier for them, Yeah. And eventually we want to open up like a business. Like we were thinking like maybe a thrift store or something and hire people who are newly sober to give them, like, cause if they feel like they need, like, are doing something, it's going to make them feel like they have purpose, and keep going.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. A podcast with a real purpose outside of just the stories. That's amazing. I love it. Any way that I can help. I mean, I know I'm going to come on, but any way that I can help, I'll definitely scholarship somebody over at my treatment center. So for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Like I am all about that. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your story and Recovering Out Loud.
Thank you so much for having me.
Girl power.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, you guys. We'll talk to you next time. Bye. Amazing.